In Graham Hancock's Season 2, he tries again for his idea of an ancient civilization that was wiped out during the Younger Dryas. He tries it again. The first season was beat up on YouTube, and the second season hasn't. No one has posted a video on it. I think Flynn Dibble did a pre-dunking where he went through a little bit of the side spot. I didn't watch all of it, just because I didn't want it to influence what I have to say. But I'm also not an archaeologist. I'm not a professional. So this is mainly just fundamental objections that I have and fundamental criticisms that I have of what Graham Hancock is talking about in this show. Before we get started, ignore the outfit change. You'll find out why later. Like and subscribe, comment, let me know what you think. Just give me some type of interaction with the algorithm. I would really appreciate it, and it would really help the channel. So yeah, please like and subscribe. Now, Graham Hancock is a very interesting character. He used to be an author. He was very ancient aliens. He was very into that. Aliens did it all. It was all aliens. He loved that idea. Now, that's fine. He kind of seems to have switched up on it and is now very anti-Agent Aliens, which is just kind of weird to me because he would die on that hill. And now he's this Atlantis dude. He just loves the idea of Atlantis. But who am I? Who am I? Because if I'm going to be talking about Graham Hancock's whole show about archaeology, I should probably talk about who I am. So hello, my name is Caiden Christensen. I am just a dude. I really am. I just am a dude. I don't go to school for it. I don't have a degree in anything. All this stuff is just a very personal interest that I just love. And that's about where Graham Hancock is at, to be honest. He is a journalist. He's not a archaeologist. So I think this is a very even playing field right now because I'm not one of the dogmatic archaeologists that he hates so much. I'm just a regular dude. I don't really have a script for this. I wrote some notes down in a journal that my sister gave me. Shout out to my sister. Kind of just gonna be going off the top of my head here, and just ranting. So this is kind of just gonna be like a podcast. Gonna have this on in the background while you're doing laundry, while you're, I don't know, working, cleaning your room, doing whatever. So we should really talk about what Graham's idea is, and then I'll start to get to my fundamental ideas. What we need, what are the basics, what do we need to prove that this civilization is a real thing? So, if you don't know what the Younger Dryas is, the Younger Dryas was a sudden return back to very cold temperatures at the end of the last interglacial period. So, we are currently in an ice age, and it has been an interglacial period for the last 10,000 years now. Um, so we are still in an ice age now, but the glaciers have receded to the poles, which is what defines as an ice age. So yeah, we are in an ice age, but I think it's been going on for what, like 2 million years now? But the Younger Dryas, right before the interglacial period hit, there was just a last hurrah, a last attempt of the ice age to make an impact. And it kind of did. I mean, it was pretty devastating to the northern hemisphere, you know, but it wasn't devastating for the whole globe, which is what he needs. He needs you to think that the globe was wiped out by this Younger Dryas period, and it just wasn't. And when you realize it wasn't, you realize that his extinction of this ancient civilization just isn't there. It's not necessary. We don't need this civilization, but he needs this civilization, and he needs the Younger Dryas to be the cataclysm that wipes it out. And he definitely thinks that this was at least a seafaring civilization. In this site, he doesn't talk a lot about archaeological things themselves. It's more just the idea of the fact that they were sharing other ideas with the world, you know. but they must have been seafarers at least. At the time I'm recording this, I've only seen the first 4 episodes, so that's what I'm covering right now. Is at least I'm hoping to get to the first 3. So I haven't finished the whole show, but at least from where I'm standing right now, um, he hasn't talked about what they've ate. He mentioned bananas, but we'll get to that. So he hasn't talked about what they ate, which I think is very important in a civilization. But surely he thinks they were farmers, right? I mean, they were building megalithic structures that they knew how to build it because they taught everyone else. So obviously they knew how the fuck to do it. So it's just crazy to me that he doesn't talk about what they ate. He doesn't talk about what they ate in season 1. So I'm assuming he doesn't talk about what they ate in season 2. But like I said, I haven't finished it. So they were at least seafarers. I assume he thinks they were farmers. They were megalithic structure builders. But we need a couple things to prove that. We need structures. You can't just point to a site and say that they did it. You need actual proof, you know? Because these sites that he's pointing to are already discovered sites that we know about, we know the history of. So to shroud it in this mystery is just unnecessary. We need structures, we need walls, we need buildings, we need roads. Not the fucking Bimini Road. That's a fucking natural rock form. A geologist knows that. We also need artifacts. We need stone tools like this is a stone tool. They've been doing this for a million years now. If you can't give me a stone tool that is better than this, then it's not this amazing civilization that you're talking about. Okay. What else do we need? Okay, so I think the last thing I mentioned was a stone tool. We need cultural layers. We need layers in the sediment where there were people that lived there. You know, you can carbon date fucking anything. You can carbon date three. Okay, you can't do 3 million. I was gonna say 3 million. You can't do carbon dating 3 million years back. But you can carbon date something fucking 20,000 years back. But unless you prove that there were people there, it doesn't fucking mean anything. So we need cultural sites. Maybe a fire. We need DNA. The biggest thing that we would look for in trying to relate people together would be DNA. Like if you can find a skeleton from this part of the world, you can find a skeleton from this side of the world, and you can sequence their DNA and see that hey, someone came along at some point to both of these people and interbred with them. I mean, sex is something that is going to happen constantly. It's going to happen all the time. So, surely if there was a civilization that was going to all of these other civilizations and teaching them how to farm, teaching them how to build these sites, you would think that they would be breeding with them. I mean, they're also Homo sapiens. So it's just crazy to me that we don't even have a signal of it. We don't have a signal of it in DNA. We would definitely see that. Genetics has gotten so goddamn good in the past 20 years. And obviously I don't do any of it. That shit's insane. I can't do that stuff. But people can, and Graham Hancock can't. So like that, just like what I was saying, we're on the same page here, brother. Now, Graham talks a lot about flood myths. Flood myths. He wants all of these, well, just myths in general, folktale, oral traditions. He is obsessed with them. He takes them at face value. It's low-key insane. It's like the equivalent of going into a bookstore, picking up any single book in there, and taking it as fact. You can't just take oral traditions and oral stories at face value. Have you never heard of the goddamn telephone game? This stuff gets exaggerated. I mean, humans do it constantly. It's what we fucking do, dude. We exaggerate stories. So it's crazy to me that he thinks that these oral traditions could be around for over 12,000 years and they're the exact, they're fact. They are fact today. It's just crazy to me. It's crazy to me that he takes that at face value over some archaeological evidence. The thing with myths is that it's not falsifiable. Like you can talk about all these myths and you can make them into whatever story you believe, but they're dead now. Like, we can't ask them. He talks a lot about comets and floods, and that all of these comets and floods relate back to this one single event, the Younger Dryas. He wants to date all of these flood myths and all of these comet myths back to 12,000 years, which is not an easy task. I mean, some of these sites he's picking are like so far ahead of 12,000 years and so far behind of 12,000 years. Like, there's insane time gaps in these that he's trying to push these sites to. And it's like, why would it be all one flood? We don't need it to be one flood, you know? Like, he is constantly trying to date it back to this one flood. I assume he thinks it was one flood, maybe a series of floods in a short time. But I mean, he surely thinks that all these floods are relating back to at least one event. Which is crazy to me because water is such a natural thing. Like, you need water to live. So water is gonna be anywhere where humans are at. Like if there was a human civilization, there's probably goddamn water near it. Because you just need it to live. You need water every day. So some people choose to live where there's more water. And sometimes when there's more water, things flood. I mean, natural events happen. You can't control when it happens. So to say that all of these civilizations all had one massive flood is crazy to me. You know, you don't know what floods these people have been through. Especially the Amazon. He picks on the Amazon in like the first and second episodes, and it's like, what? A flood myth? You think that this flood myth was all of the other floods? It's the fucking Amazon, dude. Like what do you think happens in the Amazon? It's goddamn wet. Um and you can only imagine that these people who didn't have an understanding of what a flood actually was, you know, they would definitely write about it. I mean, this was insane. An insane wave of fucking water hitting them, destroying their entire town. I mean, this shit would have been absolutely devastating to them. Any flood would have. Not just his flood. Like, any flood would be goddamn devastating to any of these cultures. He also talks about comet myths. Um, I disagree highly with the idea that all the comets that they were seeing was from the Younger Dryas impact. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis is just an idea that the Younger Dryas was started by like a meteor or like a comet that fucking hit the Earth. Um, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't really think we know the answer yet. I mean, the impact hypothesis is a good idea. Whether it was started and then the meteor hit and it made it faster, I don't know. I just don't know. But I also don't think that matters because I'm just gonna assume that that was a meteor that hit just for the sake of the argument. You know, I want to give Graham the best possible argument. I'm gonna try not to strawman him, which is what he does during the entire show. He strawmans everything. He's really obsessed with this idea that archaeologists have this dogmatic view that they won't change, that they have to stick with this idea because that's where the money's at. You know, that's that if we changed any of these ideas, then it would be detrimental to the whole idea of archaeology. And that is just so stupid. It's just so dumb. You know, obviously there are some ideas that we have that have a lot of evidence, but there are some that we don't have a lot of evidence for and are very subject to change. Like the arrival, like the peopling of America is what he talks about in this show because you know it's the Americas. Um, so he takes advantage of us not knowing the exact date of the peopling of the Americas, and our past ideas of the peopling of Americas, and he uses that to his advantage to be like, archaeologists say that it was this far back, but this site is way farther back. And it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of what they fucking do. Like, if they're just sitting around fucking pushing pencils, just talking about the sites that we already know, then archaeology isn't happening. Archaeology is happening when we discover new things, when we go back and revisit. We might not, there might not be a paradigm shift where it changes the whole world of archaeology, but sometimes we can go back and we can tweak a couple things. That's just how science works. It's always changing, but that doesn't mean that you can't trust science, because science is just the most we know right now. In 100,000 years, maybe everything we know is fucking wrong, but that's not the point. The point is that what we know right now is just the best possible idea. And just because we don't know something doesn't mean that it has to be Atlantis. It could simply just be that we don't have the answers. We don't need this lost civilization to be the answer to everything. It's just not falsifiable. I mean, I could go back and tell Graham, maybe your Atlantis was taught by an even more ancient civilization. Like, it's just not falsifiable. We can't go back and ask them who gave them these ideas. And Graham trying to be a martyr is just so ignorant, dude. Like, it's just so dumb, because he visits all these sites and he talks to all these scientists, and he's using their work. Like, as far as I'm aware, Graham did not do a scientific study. He may, I'm pretty sure, at least he helped and discover some geoglyphs, which is great, but you're putting it like you've put together this team of rogue archaeologists that are looking for the truth of your civilization, and it's just not true. you know these archaeologists are just doing their job. They would be doing what they're doing if you were there or not. So to act like he's putting together this rogue team to go against the academia of archaeology is just so suspicious, dude. Like he just paints a bad picture in your mouth for what like all of science is. If the whole time he's talking shit about these scientists, but then he's using their discoveries to talk about his idea, it's just so funny to me. It's so ironic that he can be so disrespectful to the whole idea of archaeology, and then use their paper, and then use their studies, use their sites that they're studying, and just kind of mix their words around. I know in the first season he did it a lot. There were a lot of people who came out who were featured in his show, came out and he was like, yeah, no, he like fucked up my words. He was mixing up all my shit. He cut out a lot of context of our conversation, and he made it seem like I believed his idea, which I didn't believe. I'm not sure if he did it in this season, but I doubt he changed his ways. Wow, I've been yapping for a while and I have not even gotten to episode 1. So let's just go ahead and get into episode 1. So we start off episode 1. We're talking about the Bering Land Bridge, which, if you don't know, is the idea that around like 12,000, 13,000 years ago, something like that, the first people in America came across the Bering Land Bridge back when the ice receded for a little bit. They got in, and boom, they were in fucking America. That was our best idea at the time. But we now know that they were in America a lot earlier. Maybe they got in America through the Bering Land Bridge, but it wasn't at the time that we thought. Maybe they got there at an earlier period and they made it through. Maybe they just said fucking and went through the ice, dude. Like, we just don't know for sure. But my favorite theory is that they were, they kind of maybe built rafts. Maybe they didn't build rafts, but maybe they knew to hug on to a log that was drifting in the sea. Maybe they knew that. We don't know this, though, because wood does not preserve in the archaeological records. Sometimes it does, but that's under very, 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 very rare circumstances. And then we have to find it, too. So it's just very hard to find wood. Um, and maybe if Graham wants to say that his civilization was entirely made out of wood, I would be fine with that. But then, how can you explain that they were teaching all of these people to work with stone? Okay, I'm getting a little ahead. Okay, so he talks about the Bering Land Bridge. That was our best idea. We now know that it was farther back. Maybe they were hugging the coastlines. Maybe that's how they got to South America so quick. Was because they were hugging the coastline, instead of having to go through all of the land. Keep dropping my goddamn pencil, brother. Okay. What next? We go to the white sand footprints, an amazing sight. The white sand footprints are one of the things that make us realize that people were probably in America long before we thought. This is an amazing sight. Did I write down how far it dates back? I did not. Oh wait, I did. 21,000 to 23,000 years ago. So dunks on archaeologists by being like, "Oh, they thought it was this, but it's actually this now." And it's like, yeah, that's kind of the fucking point. That's kind of what you do as an archaeologist, is you discover more things. Like, if I was so dogmatic in the idea that people had only arrived like what 13,000 years ago in America, then I wouldn't be doing any more archaeology. I mean, I'm not doing archaeology anyway, but that's not the point. That's not the point. I'm not an expert. It's just crazy to me that he thinks that scientists are dogmatic when that's the opposite of what they do. If anything, Graham is the dogmatic one when he's talking about all these ideas that he has been hunting down for so long. He mentioned it. He mentions it. He's like, I've been searching for this civilization for years, decades. I think he says decades. But he's been searching for this civilization for years, and it's like, that's probably the problem. Like, there's nothing wrong with being set out on trying to find something, but when you start with an end goal, you can kind of skip over certain sites that prove you wrong. Like, there are a lot of sites that prove that Atlantis just isn't real, and he kind of ignores them and puts some sites only in a spotlight that he can twist and use to make his civilization a reality. The sites that contradict him, he doesn't really talk about. So if anything, Graham would be the dogmatic one. He doesn't want to change his idea about Atlantis. Maybe he doesn't want to accept that he's wrong. And I genuinely think that he believes this. I think that's also the problem. I don't think this is a money thing. Like, I don't think that Graham is addicted to the money. I think that Graham just has a genuine belief in this idea, and he's so blinded by all the actual evidence that points against it that he only looks for the evidence that goes with him. It's just crazy to me. It's just crazy to me. So, David I'm so sorry. I don't know how to say the name. I'm so sorry. I should have double checked that. I'm not going to pronounce any name correctly in this video, by the way. So, if you're a person who worked on this show with Graham, I'm just going to go ahead and apologize. I don't know how the freak to say your name. I was going to say fuck, but I don't want to. I need to calm down. I'm on camera. I'm on camera. So, David talks about the megafauna, the sloth, mammoth, camel. He says that it has to be at least 11,500 years ago, which is not wrong. But he talks about the carbon dating being 21 to 23,000 years ago, and that's the killer point here. Is that he wants to push this back so far that he will do anything. He's like, it has to be at least 11,500, 12,000 years ago. That's where my point is. Guys, look, I'm right. And it's like, yeah, but you're missing the part where it says it's 10,000 years farther back. And Graham thinks about this. Like, he mentions that it's such a shocker. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be wrong. But I feel like we thought that people were in America a lot earlier than the evidence says, right? Like like I was saying, you archaeologists have to take oral myths into account. So sometimes when the oral myths be like, oh well, we've been here so fucking long, and it's like, oh well, maybe they've been here so long, but we can't say that without the evidence. Like you can think it, that's fine, because a lot of archaeologists did think it. They did think that people were in America a lot earlier than what we had evidence for. But you can't just say it without evidence. You need the evidence for it. So that is where white sand footprints are so crazy. Is because it gives us the evidence that archaeologists were probably right in their predictions and thinking that people were here for a lot longer. But you just can't say it without the evidence, which is why for so long it was that 13,000 year date. I hope that's right. I hope it's 13,000. He talks about archaeologists as this day as this dogmatic thing. I almost said David, but David says in the show, until we have a time machine, we won't know for sure. Is this not a is this not proof of a non-dogmatic scientist? Like he's literally talking like we won't know for sure until we have a time machine. Until we have a time machine, who the fuck knows for 100%? But this is just the best idea we have. Graham then claims that archaeologists think that all of the megafauna went extinct strictly because of humans. I don't think that's true. There is some truth to that, where the humans definitely played a role. Like if you just line up the charts, you will see that when humans arrive, the size of these megafauna decrease. When humans were just in Africa, the animals were like what 20% smaller, something like that. And then when we're like spreading off into these different parts of the world, the animals are getting smaller. Not even just their bodies, their populations are getting smaller. And it's not a bad idea. Like, I mean, we know that these humans were killing amazing fucking animals. I mean, Kostenki, I did a video on that. I mean, we have in America, I think there was like a mass bison killing with like 32, 31 bison. So people were definitely killing off these mass amounts of animals at this time, and they were fucking good at it, dude. But that doesn't mean that scientists think it's the only solution that we have for it, Like, we think that the environment definitely played a part. If we think that the idea that these people were killing these animals with the idea that the climate was fucking them up at the same time, that's a pretty good understanding. That's a pretty good understanding for what killed all these animals. Oh, Keanu fucking Reeves just appears, dude. Like this is low key the craziest part to me about the whole show that I've seen so far is that Keanu Reeves just kind of just shows up and he's like, "What's up, y'all? I'm Keanu Reeves. Graham, I think you're doing something important here. You're really trying to find out the past because I think the stories are wrong." And I fucking love me some Keanu Reeves, I've been a pretty good defender of Keanu Reeves. I mean, he's a great dude. He just seems like a great dude. And so does Graham. I don't even think Graham's a racist. I might seem like I think he's a racist because of how disrespectful he is to all these indigenous cultures, but I don't think he's a racist. I think he's a pretty good guy. Maybe I haven't spoken to him, but Keanu Reeves, I definitely think is a great guy. And I think it's so funny that he just appears and he's like, "Yeah, Graham, I think you're on to something." And then he fucking leaves. He doesn't do anything for the show. But he doesn't do anything for the show. He doesn't give any archaeological evidence. He doesn't give us any DNA. He doesn't give us any structural material. He doesn't give us anything. He doesn't fucking do anything, dude. It's so weird. It's so freakish that he would just appear on the show and just be like, "Graham, I think you're onto something." But it doesn't give us anything. Like, cool. Now Keanu Reeves is on board. Um, okay. Like, what the fuck? If you're trying to win brownie points from the people who don't actually know archaeology, who don't understand what you're talking about, but they like Keanu Reeves, so now they're on your side. It's just such a cheap. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't cheap. I'm sure it was an expensive attempt to just try and get these people on your side because you know that Keanu Reeves is going to be a winner. And then he has this quote where he says, "It's not about what we do know, it's about what we don't know." And I think that is a pretty important quote just to see what Graham thinks. He doesn't care about what we do know. He doesn't care about all the evidence that we have. He wants to find something. He wants to be this paradigm changing archaeologist amateur who is like beating up the archaeologists. I don't know. Like it's so weird. He wants to be this martyr so bad that he's just like trying to like fit the fucking pieces in this janky ass puzzle, and it's like it's just weird. Like I don't have anything else to say that, but it's just weird. He complains about how the archaeologists don't do enough. They're not doing enough digging, and it's like, do you know how fucking expensive that shit is, dude? Like archaeology, like universities, they don't give them enough funding. Like it's so underfunded, and it doesn't help that we have Graham fucking Hancock coming in here and complaining, talking about this lost civilization, archaeologists are the enemies. But it's like, you realize that the more you talk about how bad archaeology is, the more people don't want to fund it. Like, do your due diligence and fund a whole fucking dig. I would be happy to join on that dig. I would get myself a little archaeology title. But it's just crazy that he complains about them not digging, but it's not up to them. Like, they are at the whim of their funding. It's not up to them. And then we move to the Amazon, which I'm not going to lie, not very good at the Amazon stuff. Not my forte. But we meet Dr. Alsu, fuck, I cannot do this. Dr. Alsu Ranzi, and he talks about the geoglyphs. And Graham says something really weird. He says the geoglyphs couldn't exist. They couldn't exist, which is very strange to me that he says they couldn't exist because, I mean, they're there. Like, you're looking at them, right? In person. What do you mean they couldn't exist? I get that he's trying to set it up to be like, the people of the Amazon couldn't do this. But they obviously fucking could. You think they couldn't dig some dirt into a geometric shape? Like, that is just so disrespectful. It's just so disrespectful that he thinks that these people couldn't work together and figure out how to do this. They're digging a ditch into a geometric shape. You don't need rocket science. It's like, oh, it makes me so... Okay, sorry, I'm on camera. I need to calm down. Okay, the geoglyphs. He says they needed to see them from above to appreciate. That is just not true. You don't need to see them from above to appreciate them. I think that's just his bias looking at them from the sky. I think that back then, after they were done building this for whatever purpose they needed for, they were pretty appreciative of it. Like, you don't need to, like, I don't need to look at my house from the fucking, like, sky to appreciate the house that I live in. It's my goddamn house. I appreciate it. It has my purpose. I don't need to look at my car from the sky to see it driving off, like, to appreciate my car, because I have my own purposes with my car, and it's just a bad argument. Like, it's just a bad argument to think that these people couldn't appreciate what they were doing because they couldn't see it from above. It's just such a bad lining of argument. Like, I don't understand what his point is. Graham mentions that we have over 1,000 of them. So, yes, they obviously could do it, and they did it very well. They were fucking masters at it. They were doing like over 1,000 of them that we know of. And we only have seen them, if I am correct, because of deforestation that has happened in the Amazon. You can only imagine how many goddamn ones there are under the trees that we just cannot see. They probably were so goddamn good at this. We don't need an Atlantis to teach them this. They taught themselves. And you can't be like, oh, well, how do they just randomly come across to like doing it? How do they just magically know? We don't know that. We don't know if they were successful on their first attempt. I assume they weren't, but we don't know if maybe they failed. Fucking put the ground back to where it was. Try it again. We don't know. We do not know. You cannot just assume that the ones that we have were their first attempt at doing it, and that they have no further. They have no like ones from before that were more simple, more like smaller. That shows that there was probably an evolution of them learning how to do it. You can't say that for a fact just because we don't know. Alright, my phone died, so I had to stop recording. But I'm back. Just don't think about the outfit change, because it's just gonna be too much. It's just gonna be too much. So we were talking about the geoglyphs in the Amazon. Graham actually discovers a few of these, and that is actually pretty cool. He says he uses LiDAR to find, I think it was like 3 or 4 geoglyphs, and if it actually was him and not just a scientist there doing the LiDAR, then I think that's actually really cool. I think Graham is using his money for a good thing. I think that if that's true, big double Graham. I literally have nothing bad to say about that. Good on him for doing that. We go to Monte Allegra. Monte Allegra? Fuck, I really don't know how to say these names. I could have double checked in a time that I wasn't recording. Um, so we go to another place in the Amazon. Now this place has been protected since about 2001, so this is really cool. I think it's nice that this site has been chosen to be protected and preserved. Big W to the people in the Amazon. I don't know. But it is still pretty new, so there is a lot of research that's still getting done. Um, so we meet this dude. Can't remember his name. Of course, I can't. I do not have it written down. And he is doing work on these pictographs, and it's these very cool pictographs that date back to 13,000 years ago. Whoa, that's almost where his civilization is. So yeah, we see these pictographs and they're pretty cool. I think it's really funny. He says there's complex geometric shapes, and then it's like some squares lined up with some X's in them. And it's like, bro, I was drawing that in like first grade. I'm not like trying to like talk shit about these people who are doing it, but they're not complex geometric shapes. They're like little doodles. And then there's like stick figures. He like shows like stick figures, and they're like, bro, like this literally looks like every first grader had this level of art skill. Like this, like they were definitely not taught how to do this. Kids can learn how to do this just by being kids. So I'm not shocked that these pictographs look the way they do. They look about what we would expect. Now, these dating is true. We can't date the pictographs themselves, but there was a cultural layer behind in the cave where the pictographs were at that dated back to this 13,000 years ago, which is pretty cool. That's a cultural layer, but not a cultural layer of Atlantis, y'all. I just want to put that out there. This is a site in the Amazon that we have. There is no reason to believe they are Atlanteans and not the the people who were in South America at the time. This would be pushing the date in South America, I think, back, but it's not Atlantis. Like these are not the drawings you would expect to be drawn in Atlantis. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. Now, cave art does go back like 40,000 years. So people drawing on caves is not the newest thing in the world of Homo sapien. They've been doing it. I think it would be the oldest ones in the Americas, but definitely not in the world. They also had a binder. They had a binder. They used tree sap. And this is a very unique way, as far as I'm aware. This is a pretty unique and amazing way that they made these like cave paintings preserve, and they use their environment that they were familiar with. They were living in this environment every day. It's crazy. They thinks that they wouldn't be able to know what's in their environment. So I'm not shocked that they got some tree sap to preserve it, but I do think it's really fucking awesome. And I think that that's important because I feel like what Graham Hancock does is make the archaeologist feel like they're the fun sponge. They're soaking up all the fun out of everything. Making us seem like we think that these are simple people and they couldn't do this amazing stuff when these are amazing sites here, and Graham is blowing it way out of proportion. So we have to kind of, or when the archaeologist, but I guess me too. So yeah, we have to bring it back into reality. It makes it seem like we think that these people are less. We're talking bad about these people. Archaeologists are just so mean. When it's like no, like we think these people did amazing things. We just don't think it was Atlantis. So I think that's very important because he makes archaeologists seem like they are just these sad, depressing people who just hate fun, and that's just not true. He keeps mentioning that they're trying to send us a message. It's very stupid. There's some comments, and he says that it looks like it's coming up. I don't really know what that. I honestly think it could be the sun. I mean, I'm not doubting this dude's work. I don't know anything about going to school for archaeology, but I feel like it's just a very weird phrase to be like, it looks like this comet is going up. I think, it could just be the sun that's rising. I don't know. But that's just my personal idea. Could be a comet, who knows? But even if it is a comet, why the fuck does it matter? I know Graham wants it to be the one comet, but they were living in a time of no light pollution. They were so in tune with the night sky. They were so in tune with the stars. They were definitely going to be able to see all these comets that were just passing by because they didn't have any light pollution. And imagine how fucking bored they were. That's another thing. Is like they didn't have Twitter to scroll through. They didn't have TikTok to scroll through. They didn't have YouTube to watch. So they were just doing what they could in their environment, learning shit. Imagine all them nights doing nothing, just looking up at the night sky. They would get pretty well in tune with it. They would get pretty comfortable with the night sky. Now, as far as I'm aware, the dating of this site is controversial. But who am I to say? I don't fucking know this shit. We just need to do more work, I guess. I don't know the right dating method. I don't know. But as far as I'm aware, this dating is a little bit controversial. None of these cave paintings and these pictographs show anything crazy. Like you would expect if Atlantis came. He doesn't say Atlantis, but he's talking about Atlantis. If an ancient civilization comes and teaches them how to do these pictographs, you would expect to see them making Atlantis. I mean, why would they not draw these amazing people that taught them this? Why would they not draw the amazing stuff that they had? All we find is drawings of humans, human hands, shapes, animals in their environment. We see stuff that we would expect to see. It's crazy to me that he doesn't realize this. These pictographs are nothing different from just their environment and what they had around them. It has nothing to do with Atlantis. And in classic Graham Hancock fashion, he talks about an oral story. He talks about a myth where they mention a flood that wiped out a whole tribe, and it must be the flood that he wants it to be. Brother, they were living in the Amazon. Do you realize how many floods are in the Amazon? Do you realize how many tribes flooded in the Amazon? You're just picking on one example because oh, it must be the flood. You know how many goddamn floods they experienced in their fucking lifetime? Yeah, maybe they went through one really bad flood. Maybe it wasn't even that bad of a flood. Maybe it was for cultural significance. Maybe it was important to them. It doesn't mean that the flood happened and it wiped out this entire civilization that you want it to be. It just means that they were pretty aware that flooding happens and they didn't like it, and they like talked about it, and the story lives on. It doesn't mean that your civilization is the real thing. It just means that these people were around water. God, it kind of just pisses me off. Like, it kind of just makes me so mad because flood myths are so nuanced. They leave a lot of context out. You know, this flood myth is nothing like Noah's Ark flood myth. It's nothing like the Chinese flood myths. It's nothing like the Japanese flood myths. They all have very different contexts and are from different times. And Graham Hancock just takes out all the goddamn context and just talks about them. There's so much nuance in flood myths. Moving swiftly along, we are at Easter Island. Now, I've been wanting to talk about Easter Island for a while, and I'm so glad that he decided to do it. So, let's just get right ahead. So, Easter Island. People lived here from about 300 CE to about 1200 CE. So, really, not that long ago, not even 2,000 years ago. So, the fact that he wants to push this back 10,000 years to his Younger Dryas idea is fucking baffling to me, dude. Now, the people on Easter Island had their own language that were written on wooden tablets. It was called Rongo Rongo, and it has not been deciphered, but we'll get to that later. I'm just trying to get some of the ideas of what Easter Island is. So the island of Rapa Nui is a volcanic island, so it has tough stone. That's what they carve these moai heads out of. Now, it's important to remember that this is only a 2 or a 3 on the Mohs hardness scale, so it really is not as big of a deal as Graham wants it to believe. He even tells you that it's a pretty soft volcanic stone. So why the hell would you need Atlantis then? It's not a very hard stone to carve, and they were pretty goddamn good at it. People were using stones for thousands of years before this. Now, some heads were not finished. We have actual moai heads that were like halfway carved into the ground, and then they just gave up. Maybe because they realized it was going to be too goddamn heavy for them to pick up. They were probably walked with like ropes. We don't know for sure, but there's pretty good archaeological evidence to show that it was possible, and that's the best idea we have right now of how they did it, but who knows. Either way, it was possible. They didn't need Atlantis, they didn't need ancient technology. All they needed was a couple ropes and a couple of strong fucking men. So, let's get into what Graham wants to talk about. I will admit, W for Graham, he mentions the slave raids that happened here by the Europeans. And that's a very important story for Easter Island, and I'm glad he does mention it. But knowing what I know now, how he twists the oral traditions and like the myths about Rapa Nui that the people had, it kind of just pisses me off that he would even take like this higher position. Be like, yeah, fuck them Europeans. But, so, anyways, he picks on the hands for being similar. Okay, I might have to stand up. He picks on the hands for being held like this or like this. But it's just a very stupid line of argument because, I mean, you gotta think. I lost my pencil. You gotta think while I find my pencil. That these people were using rectangular blocks of stone. They didn't want to make 3D fucking arms. You know how complicated it is to have an arm going like that? Like that. It's fucking hard, dude. So it's so much easier if they just like carve the impression of an arm onto a stone. And he picks on a bunch of other ones. He brings them up and he's like, look at all these similar rock statues that have the arms the same way. And it's so stupid. Maybe at first glance, people could be like, oh, this kind of looks similar. But they don't. They don't look similar. None of these statues look similar at all. And it's so crazy to me because people do it with the pyramids. They're like, look at all these pyramids and how similar they look. And it's like the only thing that they have in common is that they're pyramids. Everything else about them is completely different. And that's how I feel about these stones, these statues, because these are all supposed to be humans, or at least based off of humans. So, of course, they're all going to have similar features because we are all human. So, of course, Graham talks about these folk tales and oral traditions. Again, they cannot be taken uncritically. We can't just take them at face value. That's the equivalent of walking into a bookstore and picking up a random book and taking everything in it as fact. You just can't do that. It's dangerous. So he talks more about folk tales. He wants to talk about this flood. Keep in mind, it's an island. Of course, it probably flooded. He talks about this Hiva and how they were probably his Atlantis that he's looking for, but he fails to mention, and probably on purpose, that this Hiva is another name for the Marquesa Islands. And I think that's so important to the story because they literally tell you where they came from, where all this stuff is from, and he just ignores it and puts his fucking Atlantis in the middle of the story. It's so goddamn ignorant. It's so goddamn disrespectful to just the people who actually live here and to sit face to face with one and talk to them about their history and then just fucking twist their words and just make it into whatever you want is fucking baffling to me. And I can't believe that Netflix fucking put money into this dude. He mentions that the statues might have been moved, which maybe, possibly, but we don't have any evidence for that, so why would we believe that? We also don't have any older dates of human habitation, so why would we believe that? She just has no evidence that they were moved except for the fact that he just doesn't like it, which is not evidence. That's not how you do archaeology. You can't just not like an idea and then just pretend that it's not true for your idea that you have no evidence for. Also, this debunks the idea that the indigenous people built them. You just talked to an indigenous dude talking about their history and why they built them for their chiefs. They built them for their chiefs, the important people in the tribes. And then he just switches up and is like, oh, well, maybe they were already there. Are you fucking kidding me? He just told you how they built them. You are the person who's taking oral tradition. Now he mentions these bananas that were found. This lady comes up, she does some pretty cool stuff. And it's actually really interesting, I'm not gonna lie. It's really interesting. So she finds these bananas that could be dating back to 3,000 years ago. I think it's really cool, and the fact that she could have found bananas on this place that might show that people were there. I think that's really cool. But were there people there? I don't know. I know that we have evidence of bananas being on an island, Vanuatu, which dates back 3,000 years. And I know the domestication of bananas dates back to about 7,000 years ago from the Polynesians, which, by the way, is who we think inhabited this land. Um, so if the Polynesians maybe slid by 3,000 years ago, brought some bananas, and slid back, maybe they didn't want to come to this island permanently yet. I think that's a possibility. I also think it's a possibility that maybe the wind brought the seeds, maybe the ocean brought the seeds. It's not impossible. It's a lot more likely than Atlantis did it. But also, how would Atlantis even do this? We're talking they died 12,000 years ago. Evidence only goes back 3,000 years ago, and don't fucking tell me that they were doing bananas 12,000 years ago, because bananas only date back about 7,000 years ago. We have no evidence for that. You don't have evidence that they were doing it 12,000 years ago. You only have 3,000 years ago, which is cool, but not a paradigm shift. It doesn't change everything. It's not Atlantis. Now, Rongo Rongo, like I talked about earlier, is their language. It dates back to about the 1500s, which is really not that far back at all. It's crazy that he wants to push it back, but it's really not a prehistoric site. This is a historical site. Like it's really not that old. And it just begs the question, because it's honestly all he really talks about this this Easter Island, but he doesn't do anything for Atlantis. He just talks about how we don't know yet. But how is that evidence for your civilization? We are not afraid to say that we don't know. Archaeologists are not afraid to say that they don't know. Scientists aren't afraid to say that they don't know. That's how science gets done. You don't know things, you discover them. But that doesn't mean that it was Atlantis. I don't understand. He yaps on about Easter Island for Loki a while, and it doesn't go anywhere. It has no substance to it. I think I'm gonna end it here. Um, I didn't get to finish episode 3, so I'll have to go back, revisit episode 3, finish it, then do 4, 5. Maybe depends on how he ends the episode. Sometimes he ends an episode on a site and then touches on it in the next episode, but that makes it really hard for me to do a nice cutoff spot. So I'm just gonna cut it off in the first like quarter of episode 3. But I will see you hopefully in maybe a week, maybe a couple weeks. I don't know how long it's gonna take to get the next episode out, but I do appreciate you sitting here with me. If you like the content, like and subscribe. I would really appreciate an interaction. You know, it really does help the algorithm. So yeah, peace out.